The second that he saw me, he tried to rush towards me in a fit of rage and was tasered and fell to the ground unconscious. At which point, the police handcuffed him and dragged him out to their squad car. Hi there, my name is Austin, and I'm 31 years old. These past 2 years have been very rough, and unfortunately, my brother-in-law hasn't made things any easier for me and my children. So it all started 2 years ago. My wife and I were on vacation when she fainted. At the time, we didn't think much about it and just figured that it happened because of heat exhaustion. But once we returned home, it began to happen more frequently. Concerned what it could mean, she went to see a doctor about it and found out that she had terminal brain cancer, and within a few months, she was in palliative care. Seeing how quickly it spread terrified me, but not nearly as much as her death. It was so hard on me and our 2 children. None of us were ready to let her go, but we didn't have a choice. Being the owner of a restaurant didn't help much either, as I was constantly bombarded with work and could barely make time to help my children work through this new and scary life that we were forced into. My son and daughter were not coping very well with things. They were very young, so I fully understood that it was very hard for them to understand how to process their mother's death. I tried my best to comfort them, but it was incredibly hard. I did get them a therapist, but even that wasn't enough. My in-laws reached out to me and offered for me to temporarily move in with them. They saw firsthand that my children were struggling, and they loved them greatly and wanted to help. I was reluctant at first, as I really didn't want to leave my home. After all, it was the one place where I felt closest to my wife, but I also knew that I needed the help, and so I moved into their home. It was a bit awkward, but I did get along quite well with both of my in-laws, especially my father-in-law, as he owned a restaurant as well. His was smaller than the one that I owned, but it was far more popular, and he did quite well for himself. We would often sit and talk about strategies to improve our businesses together. It didn't take long for me to begin noticing a positive change in my children. Time with their grandparents was doing wonders for them. Between spending time with me, therapy, and playing with their grandparents, they were finally able to act like themselves again. Around the 2nd month, though, is when things began to take an odd turn. My brother-in-law, Greg, began acting odd and asking strange questions.
So, Austin, how long are you going to stay with my parents?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Being here has really helped me and my kids, but it isn't going to be a permanent solution.
Sure it isn't. Just don't get any ideas about staying long-term or trying to weasel your way into our restaurant.
I had no idea where this came from. Greg co-owned the restaurant that his father had started, and I knew that in the past that it bothered him when I would talk to his father about how to run a business. But I had no idea that he thought that I was trying to steal his business away from him. I tried to help him understand that I was in no way trying to usurp him. Greg, I love your family, and your restaurant is an amazing place, but I have more than I can handle with my own business. I have no interest in trying to take yours away from you. Honestly, I'm just living here so that I can help my kids through this very challenging time. The loss of your sister hit us hard, and we're just trying to work through it, and living with your parents has helped us do that. I had told him the truth, but Greg was not convinced, and he stormed off in a huff. It was clear that he wasn't believing me, although I really didn't understand what had motivated him to think that I was trying to steal his family's business from him. It felt like he was unhinged and was seeing an enemy where there wasn't one. The next day, though, things took a bit of a turn. My father-in-law approached me and the conversation was quite uncomfortable.
Hey, Austin. So I was just wondering how business is doing.
It's okay. I've had a hard time concentrating on work since my wife passed away, but I have a great staff, and they are doing a wonderful job at keeping things flowing well.
That's good to hear. I spoke to Greg, and he had made it sound like your restaurant was about to close up shop. He made it sound like you were struggling financially.
Where did he get that idea from? But no, things are difficult right now, but the business is doing well.
Glad to hear it, but should things become difficult, you can tell me. You're still family, and there is always a place for you here in my home and at my restaurant if you desire.
I truly do appreciate that, but I can honestly say that Greg doesn't. He already thinks that I'm trying to take the restaurant away from him. Just then, Greg walked in, and it was clear that he had just heard everything that we had just said to one another.
I knew it! I knew that you were trying to weasel your way into the business. You can't take it away from me.
Before anyone could stop him, he ran at me and punched me as hard as he could. The two of us collapsed to the ground and he tried to keep punching me while I defended myself. My father-in-law quickly grabbed him and dragged him off of me.
Greg, what the hell do you think that you are doing? Get off of him! I knew that you loved him more than you loved me. Well, fine. Austin, I'll make you pay for driving a wedge between my family and I.
And then he stormed off. Thankfully, I wasn't hurt too badly and just had a black eye. I could have pressed charges against him, but I chose not to. However, neither my father-in-law or I could have guessed what Greg was going to do next. Several hours after he attacked me, I was getting ready for bed when the security company that monitored my restaurant sent me an alarm that someone had broken into the building. They had called the police, and they were on their way there. Terrified that my restaurant was being robbed, I got dressed and headed over to see what was going on. When I arrived, I saw that the front window of my restaurant had been shattered, and police were inside struggling to get someone under control. As I looked around, I saw that the fire department was also present, and there were several firefighters inside as well. Panic gripped my insides as I went in to find out what had happened. Inside, the scene was absolute chaos. There were tables tipped over everywhere, and Greg was there and fighting with police officers. He had assaulted an officer while they had tried to restrain him, and two had taser guns pointed at him and were threatening to shoot him if he didn't comply with their demands. The second that he saw me, he tried to rush towards me in a fit of rage and was tasered and fell to the ground unconscious. At which point, the police handcuffed him and dragged him out to their squad car. I was in a state of shock when a firefighter came over to me.
Sir, are you the owner of this restaurant?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Well, sir, we arrived in time to put the fire out before it could do any serious damage, but you will need to replace all of your table coverings as they are ruined.
I found out later that apparently, Greg had broken into my restaurant and had doused all of the tablecloths in the dining area with lighter fluid and had lit a couple of them on fire. Since the security company was monitoring my restaurant, they notified both the police and the fire department of what was going on, and they saved my restaurant before any permanent damage could be done. I was beyond shocked. In the months that followed, Greg was charged with breaking and entering, destruction of private property, and arson. No one could understand why he had behaved the way that he did, but he was deemed fit to stand trial and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Both my in-laws and myself suspected that Greg had gone crazy after his sister had died, and rather than go to therapy, he had turned to drugs, which made him paranoid and unhinged. Part of me thinks that he shouldn't have gone to prison and had received mental health help. But it wasn't up to me. The sad part is that with him in prison, his father was forced to ask me to help him with their restaurant and has since made me a co-owner. I, of course, made him a co-owner of my own restaurant, though as well as a show of good faith. But with our combined efforts, we have been able to run both businesses quite well, and both are doing better than they have ever done before. I did move back home, but my children and I do visit my in-laws at least a few times a week. It is beneficial to all of us, especially since my wife is gone and Greg is in prison. They need our help and support just as much as we need theirs. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.